Let's now start with Industrial Heritage at Risk, and I invite Ros Kerslake, Chief Executive of the National Lottery Heritage Fund, to lead this session. Ros.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to be here this afternoon and to be here talking about this really important topic. I suppose, and I see that this was included in the sort of the press coverage today, you know, as the first industrialised nation, the UK inevitably holds some of the world's most important industrial assets. And I should probably say at this moment that I've actually got a reel that's going to run behind me, so don't try and tie what I'm saying to the picture, because it doesn't actually relate at all, or it might, if it does, it's by sheer chance. So I think one of the things I would say is that because we have this incredibly important industrial heritage legacy, we need to see the task of rescuing and saving and preserving and reusing that industrial heritage, and particularly where it's at risk, as not just being one for the heritage sector, but actually being a responsibility of society as a whole. And I think my experience is that society as a whole hugely values industrial heritage. They just sometimes need to have it brought to their attention a bit before they remember that they do. I think we need to understand the scale of the challenge. But I think also we need to understand the scale of the opportunity, because there are some incredibly successful industrial heritage projects, and I'll touch on just a small number of them in a moment. We have achieved great things, and much of industrial heritage has been brought back from being at risk. Sadly, more goes on to the list as this happens. Possibly not so much industrial heritage, sometimes more civic heritage, but a lot of work has been done, and there are some great schemes. We're going to hear about one or two of them in a moment. We do need to understand the scale of the challenge that there is, but I think we need to also explore the range of solutions that there are available and not look at a one-size-fits-all. When you get it right, and when you really embed a scheme based around industrial heritage in the place in which that site sits, it can have an incredibly powerful effect in terms of regeneration, in terms of economic growth, and also in terms of local pride. The relationship between people and the heritage local to them is incredibly strong. Many of you will know that I spent about 10 years of my life before I took this job on, working and running one of the Prince of Wales charities that focused on rescuing heritage sites and regenerating them. And it sort of amazed me how often that when you went somewhere you would find the strength of passion about it because somebody's grandfather had worked there, or they themselves had had some relationship with it, and how strong those links are into local communities. When you think about this particular area, I think we sort of wanted to explore a number of different aspects of it. What we can learn from the successes of others, what different types of funding and support are available, and how we can build strong partnerships and why they're important. So just as sort of a background, really, and I'm sure you may have heard, and apologies, I haven't been here all day, so if I repeat something that was covered in an earlier presentation, you'll have to forgive me, because I'm sure much of this has been talked about before. Historic England did a survey in 2011 that found the percentage of listed industrial sites at risk was 3 times greater than the national average for listed buildings at risk. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by that particularly, because it is very much created by a world in which manufacturing as a whole has moved away generally, except for certain very specialist types of manufacturing from this country, and a much more service-based economy. And that's a reflection of that. But what it does mean is there is a particular challenge, and as I said a moment ago, a particular opportunity. Any of you who were able to attend one of our sort of recent launch events for the National Lottery Heritage Fund's strategic funding framework will be aware that the fund remains completely committed to both industrial heritage and to heritage at risk. We're also very focused at the moment on resilience and sustainability, because what we want to see in proposals for anything that comes forward to us, and this isn't just about industrial heritage, this is about any sort of heritage project that we're asked to fund, is something that is really self-sustaining and robust in the face of the sorts of changing circumstances which in a way are what have caused the issue with these industrial buildings in the first place. In other words, the world has moved on. So projects that are created in them have to be able to deal with changes, have to be able to deal with the fact that the economy goes up and down and that the world will change around, and therefore be very strong and resilient. And many of you will know that the scope of our work goes beyond just the built heritage and built environment, important though that is. It includes assets like collections, landscapes, infrastructure, tangible, intangible, memories and culture, for example. And some of those are so incredibly important in this context of industrial heritage. An enormous opportunity for projects to both encompass those sorts of issues, but also to contribute to the UK and to contribute to the agendas of the UK as a whole in so many different ways. Housing, health and well-being, skills, regeneration, and indeed nature in some cases. So I think although there is a challenge with some industrial heritage sites, we also need to recognise the size of the opportunity. Solutions that come forward for them, we feel, need to be well-grounded and grounded in the local context. They need to be creative and innovative. One of the really important things, in our view, is the key role that business and enterprise can play in this. We have a programme called the Heritage Enterprise Programme, which sort of continues within our existing framework, and it's a key tool for partnerships between public and private bodies that want to deliver innovative solutions for the development of assets that would otherwise be overlooked or considered undeliverable. So effectively what it does is it provides a form of gap funding, where there is a scheme for a site, where there is a commercial interest in taking it forward, but actually the numbers just don't work. And without our support and without our intervention, that project would not happen. A really good example of that is in Belfast at the formal Harland and Wolff headquarters and drawing offices, which have now been transformed into a really world-class hotel facility. And it's an amazing project, but it's also only one element of what is actually a much larger scheme of investment and regeneration, which can be found at Belfast Titanic Quarter. And it's a great example of how you can bring together aspects of heritage, which are some of them really important and charitable supported, and those which are much more commercially led. In addition to the £5 million we put into that particular scheme, we also put £50 million of lottery funding into HMS Caroline as part of our First World War investments. So on that site, you have not just this sort of wonderful hotel and HMS Caroline, but also, of course, the Titanic Museum as well. You have a real gathering together of cultural offerings that have been supported in different ways and through different routes of funding. The overall cost of the hotel scheme was sort of many multiples of the investment that we put in, but it's of incredibly high quality. And I think what that site for me epitomises is that often his industrial sites are large sites. By definition, they were created for handling large levels of manufacturing or some other type of activity. And they therefore don't necessarily lend themselves to a single solution. They need something like a mixed redevelopment informed by local need and context. And they also need really strong and supportive partnerships, which allows for targeted investments of the kinds that I've just been talking about. And what we've been able to do over the last 25 years, since the lottery was founded, it is indeed our birthday this year, is invest over £8 billion into different forms of projects, and 1.8 billion of that has gone to projects, 3,000 of them in the industrial, maritime and transport heritage sector. And of that, much has gone in, some 125 million into canals and inland waterway projects. And 9 of the UK's industrial World Heritage sites have had £164 million in heritage funds during that period of time. So there have been real opportunities for us to put in investment into these really important projects. Again, those of you who have sort of seen what we're trying to do with our new strategic funding framework will be aware that looking forward, we're keen to not just provide grants, but also to provide a wider range of funding. And we will be looking at loans and social investment in the future. But right now, there are loans and social investment, and indeed other types of funding like private finance and community shares, all available for organisations as well as grants. And we would really encourage people to look at that full range on these sort of big, ambitious projects. And I suppose, sort of moving towards a conclusion, you know, partnerships are very much at the heart of many of the projects, and I've mentioned that earlier. But I think also the need to think about phased investment. It's not necessarily going to be possible for sites of this size and sort of stature and importance to have a complete solution. I think historically, we as an organisation have encouraged people to have quite a detailed understanding of how the whole site will be delivered before a start is made. I think we have perhaps become a little bit more pragmatic. What we encourage people to do is to have a vision for the whole site, an understanding of what they're going to try and deliver across that site, a broad context, if you like, a master plan, and then work within that to deliver elements of it in a phased basis. So to bring elements of it forward over a period of time, looking at the ways in which you can engage with different partners to help deliver different aspects of it. And I think if you look across all the different aspects of these sites, they lend themselves to such a wide range. You know, we know that there are some fantastic museum sites and preserve sites that are based in industrial heritage, but also, as I've said, they're key to regeneration and redevelopment. It's really possible to do amazing things sometimes by actually keeping key elements and then pairing it with elements of new build, and often a blend of all of those. So I hope that I've given you some sense of the sort of areas that we would want to support. And I'm really pleased that I'm now in a position to hand over to someone who's going to tell you about some of the work that they have done within this area. So if I can now hand over to Matthew, I think Matthew comes next, who's going to talk about the work of the Architectural Heritage Fund.
Thanks, Ros. It's nice to be here talking about industrial heritage. I've been talking about high streets for as long as I can remember, so industrial heritage is it's good to be back on this subject. I'm going to talk about some similar things to what you just heard from Ros, because I'm going to make 3 key points. I think others have made 3 key points throughout the day. 3 key points from our perspective, from the history we've got in kind of supporting industrial heritage at risk. And the first one of those is thinking about location. Some sites that we go and look at are particularly inaccessible or difficult to get to. And what is the most appropriate use or strategy for some of these sites? Sometimes we'll go to a site and they'll be talking about a wedding venue, and you look around at the flyover and the slag heaps, and you wonder, is that really going to be a suitable solution for the volume of kind of income that people might expect? However, locations do change. The context of locations do change. What seemed perhaps unattractive or inaccessible a few years ago may be different over time. Islington Mill in Salford, where we and the Heritage Fund have just invested, is now surrounded by development that was not there a few years ago. And this project is providing very affordable art studios for the arts community that have been priced out of Manchester. I had the opportunity to go to Roubaix in France a few years ago, part of a European project, the good old days. And we were looking there at what the local authority was doing. Roubaix is the most economically deprived city in France, had a base in textile industries. They are taking a culture-led regeneration approach, but the textile factories are providing very good homes for the tech sector. They provide very good envelopes for data centres. So again, the context around a place and buildings can change. So that's the first point I would make. Is the plan location appropriate? But also keeping in mind that location and context can change over time. The second point is to think creatively and imaginatively about solutions. Heritage centre concepts will work in some places, but what is going to generate income? Is it just going to be income as a museum, or what else is going to support the sustainability of a site? Cambridge Museum of Technology in Cambridge, very near to where I live. We've just loaned, we loaned them £100,000 a few months ago to help with the working capital requirement on that project. There is going to be a technology museum looking at a variety of things, but they've developed a bar, an outside bar, an events venue on the side of the museum. It's now my local pub, which had no influence on my decision, I hasten to add. When I heard that Tyne and Weir Building Preservation Trust were creating an art space out of a pit head in South Shields, I have to admit that my first response was, come again? But what an idea, as can be seen from this picture here. This is Rush, which was part of the cultural spring in South Shields. When people talk about arts venues and creative venues like this, it's not to say that they are necessarily an all-size-fits-all solution. More, I think the process of thinking creatively and imaginatively about uses is vital, but that thinking has to be rooted in community need. So that's more about the process, not necessarily the end use of thinking creatively about what the sustainable solution is. And finally, my third key ingredient is thinking long term. This was the point that Sunil made earlier, and I'm not just copying his homework. This was part of what I was going to say. But we first lent money to Cromford Mill. When I first came into post, I was looking at some of the first loans that we had made back in the late 70s. And we first lent money to Cromford Mill in Derbyshire in 1979. Cromford Mill, as you all probably know, one of the most important industrial heritage sites in the world and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We, along with others, have invested in this complex for many years through the Arkwright Society, and they have developed a mixed-use model through the reuse of a number of buildings on the site. More is still to be done. They've got more ideas being developed all the time. It's a huge site to make sustainable. And making things sustainable takes a long time. So taking a long-term view is vital. It's probably best not to panic funders where you get that question about how long will your project take. Don't write 50 years because that can cause some palpitations. But as Ros said, phasing is vital. Something that can be seen, I think, in the plans of Brymbo Steelworks in Wales or Verdant Works in Dundee. And I think that places a challenge back onto us as funders and as government in helping groups by providing long-term patient capital and support to help realise those long-term visions. So to sum up my three kind of key points: thinking about location, thinking creatively and imaginatively, and thinking long-term. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew. Can I now ask Claudia Kenyatta, who is from Historic England and Director of Regions.
Thank you, Ross, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to say a little bit about how Historic England is supporting industrial heritage at risk through our Heritage at Risk Register. And I thought I would start with a little bit of general context, although I have a feeling that most of the people in this room probably know most of this already. But the Historic England Risk Register includes Grade 1 and Grade 2 star listed buildings, scheduled monuments, conservation areas, registered parks, gardens and battlefields, wrecks and places of worship. And buildings go onto the register, sites go onto the register for a number of reasons, assessed against criteria which focus both on condition and on use. In the most recent Heritage at Risk report in 2018, there were 5,160 entries on the Heritage at Risk register. During that year, 318 entries were taken off the register and 242 new sites were added on. And since 1998, when the first register was published, 2/3 of the original entries on the register have come off, and the vast majority of those sites have come off for positive reasons. Buildings and sites come off the register in a wide variety of ways and through a variety of routes. Historic England grant funding does play an important role, and since 1998, Historic England, or English Heritage as it was, has provided over £50 million of grant funding for assets on the register. For some straightforward sites, we can use our grants to take them off the register completely. But for larger and more complex sites, as has become incredibly clear from all the speakers that we've heard from today, Historic England funding is only a part, and it's often a very small part, of a much broader package of support put together from a wide range of partners. But grants are only part of what we do to help tackle heritage at risk and things on the Heritage at Risk register. Equally important is the technical advice and expertise that Historic England provides through its specialist staff. And we have a regional network of around 300 staff spread across 6 regional offices, including planners, inspectors, architects, partnerships expertise, alongside a central conservation resource in our national office of around 100 specialists. We don't have a precise figure for the number of entries on the register which relate to industrial heritage. Our last detailed look at this was in 2011, when we found that 222 sites on the register related to industrial heritage, and we think that this number has since gone up, but not significantly. And this increase has included some high-profile additions. So last year, for example, the disused waterworks in Whitaker was added, as was the Casbah Conservation Area in Grimsby, which sits next to the ice factory that Duncan talked about in his opening remarks this morning. That is the Casbah, there on the right. Last year, the Heritage at Risk Register celebrated its 20th anniversary, and as part of those celebrations, we identified 20 places from the first register that have since been rescued. A third of these 20 cases related to industrial heritage, including projects such as the Manchester Mills in the Ancoats Conservation Area, which is now part of a successful residential and commercial district, the Granary at King's Cross, which is now home to Central St Martin's, and the Derby Roundhouse, the earliest railway roundhouse in the world, which is now part of the campus of Derby College. Each year, the Heritage at Risk Register has a specific theme, and as I think Ross mentioned, in 2011 we focused on industrial heritage at risk. The analysis that we carried out that year showed that, perhaps unsurprisingly, as Ross has already said, industrial heritage buildings were much more likely to be on the register than other types of asset. Industrial Grade 1 and 2 star listed buildings were over 3 times more likely to be at risk than the national average. The research that we did in 2011 also found that though 40% of the industrial buildings and structures identified could be converted to other uses, and we've talked about some of those cases in quite a lot of detail in some of the sessions earlier today, for the majority, 60%, it was much harder to see a straightforward solution. The study also found that of all the industrial buildings on the Heritage at Risk Register, only 10% were considered economic to repair. As part of our 2011 project, we also identified 10 key industrial heritage sites of outstanding national or international importance, where a range of possible conservation solutions could be taken forward. And I think what's encouraging is that in the 7 years since we published that list, most of the key sites we identified have either been removed from the register or are being actively managed towards a solution. The Elsecar engine, for example, has been conserved and forms part of the Elsecar Heritage Centre. It's come off the register and it sits within our Elsecar Heritage Action Zone, which is focused on involving the local community to uncover the history and archaeology of their village. Stanley Dock is in the process of being converted to mixed use. The new Titanic Hotel and Conference Centre has seen the Grade 2 star listed warehouse come off the register, while work is underway to convert the absolutely massive tobacco warehouse next door, which lies within the at-risk conservation area. At Backbarrow Ironworks in Cumbria, work to repair the monument is complete as part of a wider housing scheme, and once that scheme is completed, the monument will be handed over to the newly formed Backbarrow Ironworks Heritage Trust for public presentation. There's also consent for a mixed-use scheme at Sleaford Bass Maltings and at Stanley Mill in Gloucester, and work's underway on another mixed-use scheme at Battersea Power Station. And Duncan's already spoken today in his remarks this morning about our work to acquire Shrewsbury Flaxmill Maltings. So there are some real success stories to talk about here, but it is also true that solutions haven't been found for all of those priorities that we identified in 2011. And some of those sites are the orphans that Sir Neil was talking about earlier. So we have the Bowes Railway, which Sir Neil mentioned in his presentation, where there are ongoing issues with commitment, with maintenance, with vandalism, and we're working very closely with the Bowes Railway Company, an accredited museum, to try and resolve those. At the Soho Foundry, which was erected in 1795 as the world's first integrated steam engine factory, we've worked with the local authority to jointly fund a temporary solution to stabilise the structure, but a long-term solution has yet to be found. And given Sir Neil's presentation earlier, I'm not going to say anything further about Chatterley Whitfield, other than to say he's given an absolutely brilliant illustration of the length of time that conversations have been ongoing around that significant site. So it's a mixed picture. Industrial heritage sites are more likely than other sites to, and there's a picture of the Maltings, just because it's a nice picture. Industrial heritage sites are more likely than other sites to end up on the register, and they are more challenging than many other sites on the register. As we've talked about today, they're often too big, or they're in the wrong place. But despite these challenges, even some of the most complex do come off the register. So a site going onto the Heritage at Risk register is not a life sentence, and going onto the register is not an indication that we've run out of options or come to the end of the road. In fact, going onto the Heritage at Risk register can often be a moment of opportunity for some of these sites and a chance to have some new conversations. Solutions are found, whether it's reuse, as Trevor talked about earlier today, or presentation as a visitor attraction. And as I think all of the case studies that we've been talking about today have shown, we are all, as partner organisations, getting better and more experienced at working out how you find those good outcomes. We're building up a portfolio of good practice, and we're taking that learning into new projects so that we can tackle some of those really big and problematic sites in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I have to say that there were a number of projects on that list that I spent quite a lot of years of my life trying to make some progress on. So I'm glad to hear that there is some work going on some of them, and that they are now getting somewhere. I'm sort of therefore particularly delighted to ask Clare Wood to come and talk to us, because she's going to talk about a project where I did actually manage to make some progress in my last job. Clare, Middleport Pottery.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am proud to present a project that has come off the register. My name's Clare Wood. I'm the Chief Executive of the United Kingdom Historic Building Preservation Trust. I'm also the Director of Middleport Pottery. We are a national charity specialising in the regeneration of heritage buildings at risk and the rejuvenation of local communities. We breathe new we breathe new life into vulnerable heritage sites through identifying, creating and attracting investment to realise a sustainable business case, but a sustainable business case that's absolutely unique to every site. Accessing funding from both public and private sources to support the initial regeneration, we then unlock long-term operational models that ultimately relieve an ongoing burden on the public purse. So it's my pleasure to speak to you about Middleport Pottery. That is our largest site that we look after in Stoke-on-Trent, and it's the UK's only remaining Victorian pottery still in production. Middleport Pottery was purpose-built for the manufacturer Burgess & Lee, makers of Burley pottery. It opened in 1889 and was one of the most modern and sort of well-built factories in the country. This year, we're absolutely proud to be celebrating 130 years of continuous, uninterrupted production at Burley. We're at Middleport. However, despite it being the best factory of its time, heavy production takes its toll, and by the 1990s, the buildings were very much feeling their age. The capital investment that was needed to save the buildings wasn't sustainable within the pottery production business model, and an alternative was desperately needed. This is where Ros stepped in. A mixed-use model was established for the regeneration of the site, and His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales added invaluable profile to the project. Led by the Prince's Regeneration Trust, the then parent charity of UKHBPT, £9 million was secured from sources including the Heritage Lottery Fund at the time, Regional Growth Fund and English Heritage. The funding enabled purchase of the site in 2011 and was followed by a comprehensive reconfiguration and sensitive restoration with Field and Clegg Bradley Studios as the lead architect. The work is very much characterised by a light touch. It's absolutely intentional that it should be difficult to see where the regeneration has happened. And this feat was absolutely made more difficult by the fact that Burley production had to continue uninterrupted throughout. Middleport Pottery as we know it today opened to the public in summer 2014, and the project was recognised with a series of awards including a REBA National Award and a Europa Nostra Prize for European Cultural Heritage Conservation. Now an independent charity, UKHBPT own and operate the site, which is run by a small team and a dedicated team of volunteers. Entry is free of charge. Middleport Pottery, for me, exemplifies adaptive reuse. Alongside Burley, our main tenant, we have a further 8 tenants, 6 independent makers running small craft businesses, a digital media firm, and Clay College Stoke, a 2-year skills-based ceramics course with 12 full-time students based at the site. The Charged Heritage Trail takes visitors to the most significant, heritagely significant areas of the site, and you'll find in your packs today a complimentary heritage pass, so please do come and visit us and join us. The factory tour, which is led by our incredible volunteers, gives an insight into Burley's production process and includes the tissue transfer decoration technique. Middleport Pottery is the only place in the world where tissue transfer decorating can be seen in production. This is absolutely about creating and saving something utterly unique that was absolutely at risk. We have a dynamic events programme. It includes jazz nights, it includes beer festivals, you name it. And they're excellent routes for engaging new audiences in the site. Financially, our rents from our tenants are a reliable source of income, and we have a percentage of turnover from both the Burley factory shop and from our popular tea room. Additional income is raised through retail, through ticketed admissions, through venue hire, and through filming fees. A second phase of development is now underway. This is my part of the story, I suppose, working with the community to address local needs and enhance our sustainability. The strategy includes increasing visits to 100,000 per annum by 2024, with at least 10% of these coming via our learning programme. The Middleport Pottery Learning Programme is creating a real sense of pride in the local area, and one of the important aspects of it is that it doesn't romanticise the industry. Through this programme, we're becoming a really important resource for the schools in Stoke to contextualise the curriculum and improve pupil engagement, which is a real problem locally. We're regenerating Harper Street, which is a derelict Victorian terrace opposite Middleport Pottery, and we'll use that to create a new heritage attraction, a community centre, creative workshops and publicly accessible research hub for our collection. Now the question is that industrial heritage? Absolutely it is, because that Victorian terrace would not be there without Middleport Pottery being there. Our volunteering programme creates social, learning and personal development opportunities, and I'm often nearly brought to tears by some of the stories of our volunteers and the impact that the site has had on them personally. It's pretty astounding. In addition, one of the brilliant things about our volunteers is they're a very diverse group. And one of the things that does, of course, is shout really loudly to everybody that this place is for everybody, because people can see themselves reflected in the volunteers working there. Partnerships are really important. Through our partnerships, we access incredible opportunities, such as hosting Poppy's Weeping Window, which last summer attracted 122,000 visitors in 6 weeks. This autumn, we are hosting 3 brilliant contemporary artists as part of the British Ceramics Biennial, and next year we hope to host our first major outdoor theatre programme. I hope this short introduction has sort of given you an insight into the potential for industrial heritage regeneration. We have achieved an enormous amount on the site, but we still have a lot more to do. However, I'm utterly fortunate, and I feel it every day, to lead a team whose ambitions and whose talents are absolutely huge. God, my timing's impeccable. What I should say is I think you can probably tell, I could do this all day and talk about Middleport and talk about the potential. So please do contact me if you want to know anything more. It's my pet project, my pet thing to talk about, so I'd love to tell you more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. I have to say, when we finished the construction work on the project of that first phase that Claire was talking about, after about 5 years, I said to the team there, we've now finished the easy bit. The difficult bit starts now. So I'm very, very glad that Claire is there to take it forward and do that difficult bit so successfully. Fantastic story. Thank you, and thank you to everybody else that's spoken. I suppose just in summing up, I think what you've heard from all of the speakers is about opportunity. I'd really like to sort of end this on a positive note from our perspective. I think there are huge opportunities in industrial buildings. We as the fund, and I think you heard the same thing from the Architectural Heritage Fund, are really looking for people to take advantage of the opportunities that we make available and to bring us really interesting and innovative proposals about how the thing that your project that you want to do will make a lasting difference for the UK's communities and for industrial heritage. Thank you very much.